what did you say? We're at war?
Well, I remember when the first plane hit, I was on set doing this soap opera called The Guiding Light.
Oh,
Right?
okay. I know that well.
And they said, "Oh, so you won't believe this. A plane accidentally ran into the World Trade Center." I said, "Accident?" I said, he would have to lose his eyesight mid-flight to miss a building that big.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's how I knew that.
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean,
What was
that's how
coming?
it looked in the beginning because you were thinking like, no, that you can't leave. You know?
Yeah. And, you know, and I remember it, man, and I was looking up because we had the TV on. But I was just laying there. But it
then
was.
the second one and then the third one.
Yeah.
It's like, wow.
Yeah, and the buildings collapsed. And then. So what do you think overall about 9/11?
Well, you know, when you stop and think about it, brother, if you know history and if you understand history, in my mind, what I was saying was, look what's falling on the African burial ground, because that's an African burial ground down there. You know, they found bones not too long ago, a couple years back. They didn't talk about it much. It just came up and then they didn't do anything more with it. But they found bones under the ground. And it could not have been the people that were in the building. Those were black bones. Those were African bones.
Wow. Were they able to decipher what period?
They shut it down. They shut all news about that down. This happened maybe 5 years ago.
Wow.
And you see, the bodies that were in the building that went through that were vaporized. So bones could not have been left behind. So to find bones when they were going to build the new towers,
Right.
those bones had to have been there before 2001. All down there, see, down there was all swamp at one time.
Oh, and they did it sort of like New Orleans, put trash there to build on top of the trash.
They built on top of that in order to build that business area.
Okay.
But that was, Africans and Jews were not allowed to be buried in New York proper. So they had to be buried down there. That's why that's an African burial ground. Was because blacks and Jews were not allowed to be buried in the city unless they owned the property, which is Senegal Village, which is in Central Park.
That's what Central Park. Can you break that down for me?
Well, it's Senegal Village. It's not Senegal Village because that was first purchased by the African Methodist Episcopal Church. So that area basically, in fact, I have something up online that I did there. My son and I did a documentary on Senegal Village. It's not Seneca Village.
Okay, because my understanding is Seneca.
Yeah.
The way it's pronounced, but Seneca.
To take your attention away from the realities of that was a little African village. That was an African city down there. And it was purchased by the African Methodist Episcopal Church. That's why it's called Senegal Village.
Do you know the parameter of the village and at what time the village was up?
Well, you're dealing with with like late 1700s, early 1800s, just the whole scope of things. And you're looking at, and again, I may be off some, but it's in the 80s. And it ran between like Central Park West and 7th Avenue. And they had their own businesses. And again, it was the church that set it up. They had their own schools, had their own businesses.
So we're talking post-slavery at the time, or pre-slavery?
Well, you're talking about a continuum.
Okay.
Because remember, there was enslavement in New York coming up into the 1700s, going into the 1800s. So the largest plantation in America in the 13 colonies was in Brooklyn.
Really?
Yeah. And also, Battery Park.
Yes.
Okay, that's where the docks used to be, where they would bring the Africans. And they would march them across to the other side of New York, which would be Wall Street, where they would be sold in Wall Street. And when you're dealing with stocks and bonds, the thing is that Africans were considered to be chattel because they also sold cattle. They sold a lot of things, but they sold black folk. Mm-hmm. And so basically, stocks and bonds comes from livestock in bondage. See, it's right in front of us, but it's just that unless you zero in on the conversation, you miss certain important points to understand.
It's veiled. It's really veiled.
And also, because they brought so many Africans over, many times they could not house everybody in Wall Street, because, there's prisons under the Stock Exchange building.
No.
Yeah. The movie by Bruce Willis, shows it. Die Hard. There's a scene in one of those movies where he's underneath the stock exchange, where you see the real prisons. That's where they used to keep the Africans before they brought them up to sell them. But there were some Africans that they brought so many over at one time that they literally just had to drop them off into little prisons along the street from Battery Park going over to Wall Street. So today, guess what that street's called? Chambers Street.
Ah, yes.
So that's where they used to put, those were little prisons at one time, where they held Africans. And then when it was time to sell them, they would take them across Chambers Street into Wall Street on the stock exchange and sell them.
So the actual stock exchange, they used to trade slaves there.
Yes, yes. They sold them.
Sold slaves there.
Yeah, yeah. That was the first stock exchange. It was livestock or black folk, because they considered black folk like chattel. So they were like livestock.
I remember being in, my wife and I, we were in Charleston, South Carolina for a wedding, and they have the auction block, the block right there, and it's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
But to think that it's in here in the metropolis of New York City.
Right here in New York. Black folk built Broadway and Broad Street. They also built, that's the Bowery.
The Bowery.
Black folk built the Bowery. Black folk built the White House. Black folk built Philadelphia. And white folk didn't teach them. They brought the skills of masonry with them.
Are we talking, because I hear a lot about masonry. Are we talking Freemasonry here and the alchemy and these things? Or?
Well, no, I'm talking about Masons, and that whole concept is around building. That's why the symbol of the G with the, with the tool is there. But the idea that you're dealing with is masonry as it relates to building, construction. So when I say masonry, I'm talking about builders, so to speak. Masons and Freemason. By the way, that's not even Freemason. That's not how you spell Freemason. You spell Freemason P-H-R-E, Freemason, which means son of light, which is the last degree that you go in the African Kemetic wisdom school. You have the initiate, you have the apprentice, then you have the son of light. That's when you're an elder. You're a son of light. And that's what a Freemason is. Frey, light, mason means son of.
How did Freemasonry permeate our culture? Because you have elementary school, high school, college. Everything is done in that triple. How did we get to that point?
Well, I mean, I think that peoples of European descent just did not get what we were doing. Because when you think about fraternities and sororities, that's really just another level in the system of the apprentice. You see, they didn't break it up like that. School was pre-womb to post-womb. You know, school wasn't just like going into a building. Because remember, we didn't necessarily, we could build buildings, but we didn't teach in buildings. We taught under the baobab tree. We taught out in the open. We taught in nature. You know, the reason why we're in this room right now is because this is a mini cave. In Africa, the weather is absolutely beautiful. In parts of Africa, the countries you go to Africa, they don't have roofs on their house. Because there's no need for, you know. I remember when I went to Florida, man, I was blown away. And again, you know, this goes to show to my own naivety. And even Jamaica, when I went to Jamaica for the first time, and I noticed that, like, the windows were open. You know, like the blinds and everything were open. See, I'm used to having closed windows during the wintertime.
Of course.
But in Jamaica, it doesn't get... So all you need to do is just take the shutters down so that the sun don't necessarily come in. So it's a whole different way of looking at the world when you're living in a tropical climate. You don't need buildings. The only thing that most Africans did in communities in the countries of Africa where it was warm was sleep, to shield them from animals, jackals and wolves. But other than that, everything else they did outside. They ate outside, they entertained outside, they worked outside, they went to school outside. And so Western civilization, with the advent of the Greeks and the Romans coming in to Africa, they came in as barbarians. They came in with nothing. And they absorbed everything from the cultures that were already there. And not only that, but even when they got into what we today call Sardinia and Crete and Minoa and what we today call Greece, there were black folk there. The original people that are in the Mediterranean basin are known as Pelasgians. Pelasgian. Pelasgian. From Pelasgius, which is the original Cushite people of the Mediterranean area. When you go to Italy and you go right into the Italy, all you're dealing with is Etruscans. Etruscans are black. They're Cushites. And they're all related. Sardinia, that island of Sardinia, Crete, Minoa, all of those were all African Cushite areas of living.
Now, with America, were Africans here before, or were we brought here, as the story tells us, or were we already here?
All of them are the same. We came in waves. The first peoples to people the planet were Africans. Paleo-Americans. If you want to go to America, the Paleo-Americans were the first here. These were an African people. The second wave was the Clovis Folsom people. They were an African people. The Algonquin, they were an African, but they were in modification of themselves, having lived in different areas, and of course their pigment's going to change, their hair texture is going to change, things are going to change on them. But they're still African. Pretty much like what we would consider to be African American today in all of our mixtures. The way we look. Jamaicans, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, that mixed, closer to black though. And then you have the Inuit or the Eskimo, which is the fourth migration. But the people we know of today, we call Native Americans, they are Asians that came to avoid the Mongolian invasion of Asia. They came across the Bering Strait and then peopled America, and then they took in the stock of what was in America, and that's who we know as Native Americans today. But there is evidence of Africans over 100,000 years ago in America. There's a woman they found in San Diego, California, a black woman, and her bones were dated to be 90,000 years old. The original person that California is named after is Queen Khalifa, which is an African woman. King Kamehameha of Hawaii was a black man. And so we're dealing with a reality here, but we don't know our history. And when someone tells a perfect lie, the truth is unbelievable. And we just have to understand that we are living in absolute fraud. And it's because we've allowed other people to tell our story.
Yes.
And so I've dedicated my life to studying our history and our culture, and I guess that's why Tariq Nasheed reached out to me with the Hidden Colors series, was to begin, because he had seen my work on YouTube. Because I never put anything up on YouTube. Everything that you see on YouTube, somebody else put out.
You don't put any of it?
No. Because I've always tried to stay quiet, man. I've always tried. Dr. John Henry Clark, who I consider to be my teacher, used to always tell me, Booker T, black people can do anything they want as long as they don't run out in the street and tell people what they're doing.
Hey, that's very true.
And he used to always tell me, the more popular you become, the more power you lose. And so I've always tried to stay behind the scenes, but Hidden Colors brought me front and center to the community. It exposed me to people that had never known my work. And then they Google my name, they go to YouTube and they see all these things that came down. And then they start to see, well, no, this brother been around. I've had people tell me, yo, man, I saw your son, man, he was doing a dynamic presentation. No, that was me 30 years ago. On DVD that had been converted to, on VHS, video cassette that has been converted to DVD.
Digitally, yeah.
Things I did 30 years ago, man. I've been doing this work for a while and doing presentations. And, man, they got me up on the corner of 125th Street talking to people.
Yeah.
On YouTube, because that's how I used to roll. But with Hidden Colors, it brought me front and center.
What was the Hidden Colors experience like for you?
Well, for me, it was interesting because I'm the only one that's been in every one of them. And it started back in 2010. Got a call from a brother, Ola, who is Tariq's right hand. And he said to me, we're doing a documentary and we'd like to know if you'd like to be a part of it. I have a colleague, Tariq Nasheed, he's in Los Angeles. He'd like to know if you want to be a part of it. And I said, yeah, sure. This was in the spring of 2010. So I was teaching a course in Harlem, And I decided that that would be the best place for the studio, for them to come film me. And so I invited them to come. It was in December of 2010. And they came up with their film crew. Tariq was there. And that's the first time I ever met him. And, you know, he started asking questions. And so when you're looking at Hidden Colors 1, that's my classroom that I'm in. And so that was Hidden Colors 1. Okay? They contact me and tell me it's premiering in New York in April. I said, well, that's interesting. Because I was doing a presentation, I ran a little late. But I got to the movie house on 12th and Broadway. And man, when I walked in for the first time, the place was standing room only. I thought I was in the wrong movie house until I saw my big head up on that screen. Man, I never saw my head so big in my life, man. You know, I mean, it was in a movie, man. I said, I never knew that Hidden Colors was going to be that, because I've done things, man, for folk. Mm-hmm. I've never thought of the repercussions. People say, man, we really would like to film you, like what you and I did when we met up in Jacobs. You know, you say, come on, man, I'd like to do something. Yeah, okay, fine. You know, let's see if we can arrange the time to come and do it. Right. And so that's how I've always done it. Folk were doing something, sure. And so I never knew that would turn out to become what it became. And so a year later, got a call. Tariq's interested in doing Hidden Colors 2. You know, and I'm saying, wow, you know, that's bold, you know. Hidden Colors 1 was a great success, man. To do a 2, you better be confident in your stuff. This was the one on melanin.
Yes.
So I said, sure. I'm down, but, you know, it better be good, because you got to follow up on 1. And, you know, a lot of times when you have others that come after, it's not always like the first one.
Never.
You know, it's not always like the first one, but the second one was more powerful than the first one. A year and a half later, I get a call. Tariq want to do number 3. I said, okay, man, I'll do it. You pushing it, but I'm going to do it, you know. And that was the one on the rules of racism. Okay? Big. And all this time, I'm getting more calls to come out and do presentations. Things are changing. For all of the people in the Hidden Colors series, it's bringing us front and center to the community, particularly the young people. Mm-hmm. I developed a study guide. It's up on my website now, kabakamene.com. Free. Because it came out of Hidden Colors, because so many people wanted information. They say, oh man, can you give me a book? And like, yeah, okay, I can give you a book, man, but that's not going to do it. I have to give you a lot more than that. So I brought all my work together, I put it in outline form, and I put it up on my site. So that anyone that wants to go, www.kabakamene.com, you'll get my free e-course and my study guide for free. That is my most precious gift, and that's why I did it for free. Because I believe that our community needs to come someplace, and I can't make it a financial gain for me. So my study guide is my gift to our community. It's free. You want this information, you want to know how to study the African presence in America, the African presence in Asia, the African presence in Europe, the origins of life in Africa. If you want to study it from its deepest perspective, I've got all the books listed there. I've even got the pages per particular chapter that you need to read for a particular theme. So it's all there for the community. It's free, because I believe that the greatest gift that you have should be free. Everything else you can charge, because this is an economic venture too. Because a poor revolutionary leads a poor revolution. And we better never forget that. Freedom ain't free. And for some reason, many of us don't mind paying for Kevin Hart, which I agree with, because people making money on Kevin Hart, and Kevin Hart deserves to make the money. But if you're willing to pay that to laugh, what do you pay for your freedom? So there has to be some type of economic reciprocity here. But the most important thing that I have is free. And it becomes important that when you go to my site, you can see all of the work that I've done over the years that you can then get in terms of the topics that you're interested in. And it's all up there, you know. After Hidden Colors 3, okay, a year and a half later, I get a call. He interested in the religion of white supremacy. I said, okay. See, my wife has been on this road with me all my life, man. We hang out, we just do things. So she's watched this over the years.
She's been there for the whole ride.
The whole ride, the pre-ride, man. Pre-ride, before I even had a ride, she was there. That's how I know she with me, because she was with me when I didn't even have a job, man. So I know,
Let me ask you this question, because I see this a lot with younger folks, and even my age, I'm 41 and down. A lot of people from my generation or younger aren't in relationships. Can you give them any relationship advice? I don't even think they know how to have relationships.
Commitment.
Okay.
Commitment. But what happened to my generation? What did the fathers do to them? Did their fathers show commitment to mother? I don't blame the young people. They were born into this. For some reason, we, the adult population, the elders, did not show commitment. You see, it's not the relationship. They got relationship. The problem is they got too many relationships, but no commitment. They don't understand commitment. I'm not happy with you no more. But who the hell cares about your happiness? If you have children, you have a commitment to those children. And nations, see, some people want to build nations. Some people say empires. I want to build dynasties. Dynasties are built on families. You can build a nation built on people. But if you can walk away from your loved one, you can walk away from the nation. You can walk away from an empire, but you can't walk away from a dynasty, because your entire existence is right up inside that family. And if your family ain't tight, you ain't tight. That's why I always ask people, how your family? If I ask you how you doing, you say, I'm doing fine. How your family? Oh man, we got some problem. No. If your family got problems, you got problems. Don't tell me you fine if your family got problems. In fact, you could be having it very rough and your family all right, then you all right. See, that's an African tradition that we've lost, which is commitment. That's why we couldn't meet the person we were going to marry the day that we were going to marry them. The so-called arranged marriage, because marriages were about families coming together. They wasn't so much about two individuals. I'm in love. Yeah, I'm in love. What the? In love? No, you weren't in love, because love hurts. See, we use that word love too much. That's why I don't like to use it. I don't use love, because love is when you want to walk away for your own personal reasons, but you don't, because there's something larger than you. Because once you get into a commitment, your words, I, me, and mine, change into we, us, and ours. And this generation has watched the elder generation lose their commitment to their cause. So my message to young people is to understand, like when they say to me, when there's a wedding and they ask me to say something to the bride and groom, I always say, look, y'all didn't get married because y'all in love. Y'all got married because you infatuated. When you're waiting for that call to come and you just wait by the phone and your stomach gets all queasy, and then you start checking the dial tone to make sure the phone is working, so they can get through to you. Okay, that's infatuation. That's not love. Love is when you want to walk away, but you don't, because there's something larger than just your own personal desires. And that's what built the pyramids. That's what built Africa, was commitment. Not just between people, but to issues, to causes, to family, to your neighbor. That's what built the great things. That's why the dynasties were families that ruled. And they handed down the legacy to the family, and the people said, hey, nobody better than so-and-so's son, since so-and-so did so good. So-and-so's son living around that must be able to take on. It wasn't about a dictatorship. It was about just simple common sense. And this is some of the things that I think when we get into our culture and our history, and one of the reasons why I wrote Spirituality Before Religions was to go deeper inside of us as a people to understand spirituality. Not as a religion, not just as an esoteric. That's why the subtitle of my book is Spirituality is Unseen Science, and Science is Seen Spirituality. Because that was the point that I was trying to push with us. That there is the seen and there is the unseen. And our ancestors understood. They could see the seen, but they would never see the unseen. People say, oh man, I saw the unseen. No, you didn't see the unseen. You just didn't see it before. So you think it was unseen. You're not going to see the unseen. That's why it's called the unseen. And our ancestors understood this. And when they embraced their consciousness around these ideas, they developed a systematic way of living that allowed them to produce the greatness that they produced. And everywhere that you see Africans being defeated in Kemet or in Egypt, you see a downcline in the society because other cultures come in. Then you see the raising of the civilization in the Middle Kingdom because the Africans from the south came up and conquered those Asians that came in. And then you see it down again, and that's because the Asians came in and ran the Kushites out. And then all of a sudden you see a rise in the New Kingdom because Africans from the south came in and pushed down the Asians. Everywhere that you see Africans in place, you see success. And the moment they take over, you know, Western civilization has been devolving since the Moors were thrown out of Europe in 1492. But because we're experiencing European history, we get the impression that there's been an upgrowth in civilization. There hasn't been an upgrowth in civilization. In fact, we've devolved. Just look at the conditions that we're living in today. Yeah, I tell people, you know, you say, well, what's your proof? Look around. Look at what's happening. We don't trust nobody. We don't care for nobody. There's no commitment. Lie, steal, and cheat. Tolerate those that do. That's where we're living right now. And it's a hustle. Okay? And if I can hustle you and get something out of you, then, hey, that, well, you know, all that's cool. And that's what we're living now. But in Africa, your word was your bond. I do a Kemetic Wisdom School online class, and I just completed this series on West Africa. And there are quotes from ancient travelers that go into places in Nigeria and in Ghana and in Benin, and they say, it is safe here. The society looks down upon crime, and you will pay a price for crime. You can leave your expensive worth. You don't have to worry about anybody taking it. You can walk the streets and not be worried about being accosted. Imagine what it's like to live in a safe environment like that. You know, imagine if we could live in a safe environment where we knew our children were safe, our family was safe, that we could depend on the word of the person we were talking to, that we wouldn't have to worry. Think about the kind of society you could create if you didn't have to worry about all those other things that pull you down in negativity. That's what Africa was. Okay, and now look at where we are now. That's how I know that what we're experiencing isn't an African thing. Because if you go back to Africa, it ain't happening back there. And it just becomes very important for us to understand, to know our history, and that's what I'm trying to develop for our community, to just, don't believe me. I'm not doing this for you to believe me. I'm doing this to make you think.
When you take hieroglyphics, old Negro spirituals, hip-hop slang, ebonics, we always use veiled languages for a way to communicate. What are we necessarily trying to hide or keep secret, and why?
It's a higher form of thinking. We're not hiding anything. It's the metaphor. It's figurative language. Yo, man, that's bad. See, we even took the English language and we changed it. Because the English language, Western thought, European thinking, doesn't allow us to express our Africanness. So what we have to do is we have to twist stuff. So when something is so good, it becomes bad. And then when it's better than bad, then we got to emphasize in our voice, oh, that's bad. And then when it's better than the better that is good, then our body, oh, that's bad. Our body has to get in. So what we do as a people, we try to make up for the lack and shallowness of Western thought. And so it's not that we're hiding anything. It is that we are, it's called hitting a straight line with a curved stick. A metaphor, it's a figurative language. Everything that we do, when you look at Medunetta or hieroglyphs, you can see that we're saying one thing, but behind it is the science. When the Western world tried to figure this out, they were getting too literal with this. For instance, in my book, Spirituality Before Religions, there's a section where I'm talking about excerpts from the pyramid text, and I'm analyzing the pyramid text. And utterances, what they call utterances in the Bible, they're called chapters and verse and things like that. But Africans call utterances because they come from the voice, they come from the mouth. There's a section 278 to 280 utterance. There's an utterance that comes out that says that the Pharaoh or the individual transforms into the bull. And in transforming into the bull, it represents fertility. Now here's the metaphor that you're dealing with here. You're telling a story, but there's a metaphor because you have to know that the bull represents fertility. You'd have to understand that the transformation into the bull is a form of resurrection. You see, that's hitting a straight line with a curved stick. There are things you have to know about the literal in order to be able to understand the metaphor. So Africans are so deep, we're not only literal, but we're curvilinear. That's how deep we are. And so in this idea of transforming into the bull, he starts to eat the body and drink the bloods of the gods. Metaphor. Because in ingesting divinity, you become divine, and then you can resurrect yourself up into the divine with the Creator and all of the ancestors that have come before you. Western civilization didn't get that. So they made that concept of eating bodies and drinking bloods literal. And that's the Eucharist. But the word really is Euchares. Ka is spirit, res means to rise, which means you are the resurrection and the light. But you see, you have to know this underneath story to be able to understand the metaphor. Western folk, their brains can't get that. So they make everything literal. So we're living in a linear world, but African folk are thinking curvilinear. And then what do? A couple years back, we combined what we got from doo-wop, and we combined what we got from bebop and rhythm and blues, and back from Africa in terms of the jele or the griot. And what did? We created hip-hop. And that's what hip-hop is. Now, what you're listening to now with certain things that are being said, that's a whole nother situation. But hip-hop is a direct result of doo-wop, in the still of the night, maybe my baby, going back into the 50s and 60s of that music. Doo-wop, along with the Black Panthers and Gil Scott-Heron and Sonia Sanchez and Nikki Giovanni, they all came up with this idea of meeting in the club, getting a little bit of tea, a little bit of coffee, maybe some wine, whatever it was, but then they would have spoken word. And then you'd have the brother playing the drums behind that. And then out of that came your Puff Daddies and your Jay-Z's and your RBGs and all the rest of them. That's what all came out of that concept. Because hip-hop is my generation. 1965 is the beginning of what we see as hip-hop. And hip-hop is a culture. It's not rap music. Rap is only one characteristic of hip-hop, which is the evocation of the culture. Then you have dress, the way you dress. You have your attitude or how you carry yourself, your gait, You have there are 5 different areas that is in the culture of hip-hop. And so hip-hop is a direct result of this. And so it's important that we celebrate hip-hop in our young people. Wu-Tang asked me to be a part of their latest album. And number 17 is called Message. And I was sitting on a rock in Los Angeles, in Compton, and I was doing a documentary. It's called The Secret to Balling. And basically it was getting Snoop Dogg is in it, Chris Brown, Faith Evans. There's a number of different rap artists. And then there are people in other areas. Michael Beckwith is in it, Reverend Michael Beckwith. And then myself as an educator. And the story was, what is it that that made you successful? Secret to balling. What's your secret?
Damon Dash.
That's Damon Dash and Kanye West produced this.
Okay.
And Kenyatta Griggs was the one that put it all together. Mm-hmm. Okay. And The idea was, how did you get where you got? Talk to the young people about how you got to where you got, so that they can get a sense. Because, you know, when you're young, man, you see Chris Brown slide across the floor like that. You just think he got it like that. No, he spent 18 hours practicing that. You know, when you see the rap artists out there, they're not just coming from no place. They have been working at this. Their work ethic is real. But when you're young and you see something, you just think, you know, just like people that may have seen me in Hidden Colors think that, okay, everything started happening in 2010. No, man, you got to go back to 1986 when I was doing this on the street. You know, and then that success comes from your work ethic. So that's what and so I'm sitting on this rock, and the brother Kenyatta is asking me these questions. And then all of a sudden, there's some young people that recognize me. There's some young people recognize what's going on, and they come over, because we're in the open area. And they sit down, you know, Kenyatta gets them to sit down and watch what's going on. And then Kenyatta said, well, since we're talking about young people and two young people, let's ask the young people, they have a question for you. I said, sure, come on. And so one of them said, what is your message to the young people today? Wu-Tang is in it. Redman's in it. There's a number of members of Wu-Tang Clan in it. And they saw that excerpt of me telling that story. And they said, we're going to put that on our album. And so that's number 17. It's called Message. And what I'm saying is actually talking to young people. So this ain't like, you know, I mean, they put music behind it, but this actually is me talking to young people about what would be my message to you. Me as this brother, where I am in my life, and looking at you young people, having been teaching for over 40 years, this is my message. And Wu-Tang put it on their album, The Saga Continues. Because this is what we have to start to do, because we keep looking at the young people, say what's wrong with the young people. Brother, let me show you something. I carry this with me everywhere I go. Because whenever somebody of age asks me, you know, what's wrong with the young people, I do like that.
Put a mirror up to them.
Because you the problem. Whatever you see in our young people, they are your reflection. So that's like you talking into a tape recorder and then playing it back and not liking what you hear, but you said it. So what don't you like? Our young people are us. How much time did you dedicate? How much commitment did you have to the children? What did you do for them? It's not easy being a parent, man. It's not easy being a parent. My wife and I have 3 children, 2 girls and a boy. It's not easy, man. It takes commitment. It takes work. And so it becomes important that you develop and understand, you know, what it is that we have to do. And without that commitment, we, the elders, because, you know, like in the song Glory by Common and John Legend, which was like one of the songs in the movie Selma, story about Dr. King. Common says that it's the elders' wisdom and the youngers' energy. And that's what I believe. It's the elders' wisdom and the youngers' energy that makes things happen in a society. That's why I go into prisons and talk to the young folk in there. You're our energy, man. You know what I tell folk that are in because I used to teach at Rikers, you know what I tell folk in Rikers, or I've gone to penitentiaries out in California, Atwater Penitentiary, right outside Fresno. But when I'm talking to young people that are in prison, I say, man, we need your energy in the community, man. When you get out, don't go back in. We need you. I said, I'm a teacher, man. Ain't nobody pay me no big money. I ain't making no rapper money. I ain't making no basketball player money. But I have my dignity and my respect. And I'm out here doing what I have to do for the community. You don't have to have a lot of money, man. You don't have to have all that gold around your neck. It's not that money doesn't have its place, but I don't live for it. It helps out, you know. It helps out. It's a good thing to have. But it's not something that you should sell your soul for or even go into prison for. Because you have to understand, once you're in the system, you're in it. This is one of the things that Ice-T talks about in Hidden Colors 5, the Art of Black Warfare. He talks about that concept of the idea that once you're in the system, and he said that back in the day, and I remember even in the community that I grew up in. I grew up 63rd Street, the Amsterdam Projects, up there on 63rd Street.
On the west side.
On the west side, yeah. On what we call Amsterdam Avenue, but it becomes 10th Avenue once I think you hit 59th Street.
Right.
And all the brothers and sisters, but the brothers in particular that I knew that were into illegal activities were always in illegal in order to one day become legal. They didn't want to stay illegal. It wasn't good to be illegal. You don't beat your chest because you're doing the wrong thing. But now they've got us thinking that, yo, man, I went to school, man, meaning that I went to prison. You glorify. But you see, I've been there enough to know that the correction officers that have brought me in to speak to the young people and to speak to the so-called incarcerated brothers and sisters, at 11 o'clock, man, you don't hear nothing but crying up in them cells, man. All day long. When they come home, they're all big and bad. But when they were in prison, they were scared and they were crying. Wasn't nothing to be big and bad about when you're in there. But when you come out, you try to profile like you the man. But really, for the rest of your life, there will be situations. And not only is going to prison rough, even when you get out, being on parole, people are controlling your life. For as long as you're on parole, and even sometimes after that. And so we have to talk to our young people. But I understand why we end up there, because I grew up there, man. I know what happens. Anyone that has grown up in an African American community understands that we have phenomenal, wonderful people in projects and in tenements and in so-called ghettos, whatever you want to call them. We have honorable, good people who are exposed to the very worst of things. And sometimes when you want to make a little bit of something, you might fall into it. So again, you have to have commitment. And very rarely have I ever met a brother who has gone and been incarcerated, who has not felt sadness that he did to his family, and particularly his mother. The discussions I've had with brothers about how they feel towards what they did to their mother, the pain that they caused their mother. And I know as you mature, your early life becomes almost, it grows larger than it really is. It exaggerates itself. All the great things that you did become exaggerated. All the bad things that you did become exaggerated. And sometimes, particularly if your loved ones have joined the ancestors, if they've died, a lot of times that carries with you for the rest of your life. It's a dark cloud that hangs over your head all the rest of your life. And it's an unfortunate thing, having spoken to enough people to know that our mothers in particular have done a phenomenal job, man. They really have done a phenomenal job. And I say as a brother, brothers, we have to step up. I respect and honor what the sister has done, but she should not have that much responsibility on her. Because I know, having a son, only a man can raise a boy to be a man. A woman does a phenomenal job making sure that everything he needs is there. There's no way I could teach my daughters how to be a woman. I don't know what a woman is. Mama taught her how to be a woman. I taught my son how to be a man. There are things that I saw I say, yo, come here, man. Come here. Let's get this right here. Because he's a boy. I was once there. I know what you're doing. Don't play with me. And like mothers say to girls when they're trying to wrap themselves around daddy's finger, hey, listen, come here. Yeah, you know, don't play that here. You know, women raise women, men raise men. It's not that women cannot take the responsibility, nor can a man not be a successful single parent. But when you have the balance, it creates balance, which is ma'at.
Let's talk about Jesus. I noticed... Jesus Christ. I noticed Superman is pretty much the story of Jesus. Green Mile, John Coffey, Story of Jesus Christ. Why are there so many stories about Jesus Christ put in a form where people wouldn't see it?
Because all of them come from the Osirian drama. And the Osirian drama is the original concept of the resurrection of the human, both male and female. There might be pieces of it, like in Superman when he comes from a distant. See, because that's that's not only a combination of Jesus, that's also a combination of the Dogon people of Mali, with the star system Sirius, bringing light and energy to various planets that that evolve around it. But the story itself, Jesus, Buddha, Mithras, are all stories that come out of the Osirian drama. If you want a more current story that you've just listed, Superman, all of it, look at the Lion King. Lion King is the same story.
Yeah.
You know, and the Osirian drama is an internal investigation of oneself and the spirits and the psychology, saku, which means saku. Psychology isn't the study of the mind. Saku is soul. Psychology, saku, is the study of the soul. It's not the study of the mind. But in that Osirian drama is this discussion. Where is the Superman in you? You know, that entity that has come from outer space where they cannot go back home because their planet has exploded. But the father and mother, the creator of Superman, send him to the planet Earth. And he has superhuman abilities, but he must hide himself in Clark Kent, like our spirit has to hide ourselves in our human body. Because if people on the outside really knew our divinity, they would do bad things. That's why the mother says, but he'll stand out when he gets there. And father says, but he'll be strong. He'll be their leader. He said, but they will try to destroy him. He says, but they will not be able to destroy him. So that conversation mother and father having before they send Superman down to Earth is really a discussion on who the original human beings are and the search for life. And so Siegel and the other people that put that story together, they just usurped off of Jesus, but Jesus is a usurp off of the Osirian drama, because Jesus really is Heru. Superman is Heru, because Superman's purpose was to resurrect life on Earth, his life, because of the destruction of Krypton. And so when he gets down here, he is supposed to replicate that superhumanity, which is the Osirian drama. It's just straightforward like that, brother.
Yeah.
But again, metaphorically, you have to know the story of the Osirian drama to understand Superman. Otherwise, you'd be looking at Superman, you'd be thinking that this is a European that comes. First of all, you could not look like that and be in outer space because carbon is the creator of all life. So you could not be. That's why the original human family is black, because they were able to assimilate carbon. That's what brings life. Carbon is what brings life to all things on Earth and in the cosmos. So even if there were people from outer space, they'd have to be black. Because white folk are a mutation of the original human being who is African. They are not of out there. We are out there. Eurasians are not of the earth. They were brought into existence through the mutation of the original human being on the earth. It's hard for them to deal with that. It's hard for us to deal with that because we're so in love with them that we don't know what we're going to do when Massa go. I know exactly what I'm going to do when Massa go. But, you know, I mean, but we so tight on Massa, man. We can't. Steve, man. Malcolm told the story of the house Negro and the field Negro.
Yes.
And by matter of degree, we're all there. All of us are still there in one way or another. The fact that we have not totally revolted means that we got some of the house Negro in us. Whether we want to admit that or not.
Damn.
Folk don't want to admit that, but it's true. When people treat you the way they treat us, and you let them do that, you got some house Negro up in you. And that's something that we're going to have to face one day. And I mean, we're facing it little by little. And I'm not saying that you have to physically revolt against that. But what I'm saying is that, like Gil Scott Heron said, the revolution will not be televised. But his explanation of that is the fact that what you see happening out in the street in Hong Kong right now, what you see happening all around the world, where there are people in Russia that are going against what's wrong, that's not the revolution. The first revolution isn't televised because the first revolution happens in the mind. So that when in your mind you say, I ain't taking this no more, I've had enough, that's the revolution. Everything else that you do after that is a result of the revolution of the mind. It's like the story I always tell about the man that visited his friend, and his friend was, they were standing there talking, and, the man's dog was at his feet, and the dog was yelping and hollering. "Ah!" The dog was crying and everything, and the man was looking, and he was looking at his friend. His friend didn't say nothing. His friend kept talking. And the dog was yelping and crying, and, he was wondering, why is my friend not reacting to the dog crying like that, And so the guy began to investigate, and hey man, your dog. Your dog is laying on a plank of nails. And he's crying, man. He's bleeding. And his friend said, yeah, I know. And when he gets tired of it, he'll get up. So I'm telling black folk, are you tired? Are you ready to get up? I hear you yelping, but you ain't getting up off that plank of nails. Yes, Hotep family, I encourage you to look to Amazon for my new book. It's my second book, Spirituality Before Religions. And it explores spirituality before religions existed. And it goes from the very beginning of time, even before the beginning began, unto what we're experiencing today. So I encourage you to go to Amazon and download Spirituality Before Religions.